I think we are. Yes, we are. Hi. My name is Dennis Levin. I'm a retired pastor here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly Bible study. Today we're still in the first chapter of Deuteronomy. And we have a number of people in class who are here for the introduction, so I'll reiterate a little bit about the book of Deuteronomy and help us to understand where we're going with this. The book of Deuteronomy is part of the Pentateuch. In some respects, even though it's the last book, it probably is the first compilation of the story of Exodus that took place, because it was commissioned, evidently it was commissioned by a monarchy before the people were carried off to Babylon. The rest of the books in the Pentateuch are based on historical scrolls and things that were carried off to Babylon and compiled for the sake of the king of Persia, so that the king of Persia would allow the people to come back to their homeland. But the book of Deuteronomy existed before the people were carried off. And so what you see in Deuteronomy is a reference back to some of the source documents that were used for the rest of the Pentateuch, the first four books in the Pentateuch. It wasn't just conjured up and then they tried to build from that when they went into exile. Apparently, this book did not get carried off to Babylon. At least the way it's being presented is that it was discovered in the temple, especially by Josiah. Josiah was in the 5th century BC, and I'm sorry, he was 6th century BC, and the movement to Babylon took place in 587 BC. So Josiah's reform was just before that. What's happened is that the northern kingdom has already been invaded. The people have been taken and sold by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom was still relatively intact, but it was a vassal state of Assyria. Then Assyria went into decline, and during this time of decline, a young king, Josiah, decided that it was time for the people to reestablish themselves in their historic faith. It was time to expel all vestiges of paganism in Judah, and he also was trying to reunite the southern and the northern kingdoms, what was left of the population in the northern kingdom. He wanted to unite them and centralize worship in Jerusalem at the temple. That was Josiah's objective. Okay? Josiah was basing that reform ostensibly on this document that was discovered in the temple, the book of Deuteronomy. What was his perspective on things? His perspective was that the strength of the nation was based on its worship of one God, Yahweh. It was based on, the expression of that worship was based on the law that was given by Moses. And as far as he was concerned, the preeminent character of this nation would come from the law. So what you had was kind of like a constitutional monarchy, where the king and everybody was subject to the law, and that the law was to be enforced equitably even with people who were not part of the people of Israel. So that's where he was going, okay? Now, in order to do this, he was emphasizing the primacy of the monarchy over other institutions of government in Israel. And that included a lesser role of the priesthood in setting policy for the people, other than the law, and other than the sacrificial rituals of the temple. So as far as he was concerned, there was a definitive separation of what we would call church and state. And whereas prior to this, with previous kings, it seemed as though the high priest had primacy. You take a look at Samuel and Saul as an indication of that. Under Josiah, the king has got the primacy, and the priesthood is relegated to a secondary role, strictly religious. So what you have in Deuteronomy, and it's good that it's put at the back end of the Pentateuch, because it's really kind of a summary of what you find in the previous 4 books. So even though as a body of literature, it probably predated what was assembled in the first 4 books, it does a good job of reiterating what's found in those 4 books. There are some deviations, okay? But you're going to have some perspectives in Deuteronomy that don't appear in the previous 4 books. Context, not just that they conquered this territory, but gives a kind of historical context of what was going on in the land that they were about to conquer before they got into it. So we'll see some of this taking place, especially in chapter 2. Okay, so we're going to pick it up at verse 19 in chapter 1. Then just as the Lord God had ordered us, we set out from Horeb and went through all that great terrible wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites until we reached Kadesh Barnea. And I said to you, you have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord your God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has given the land to you. Go take up possession as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Okay, so this is in anticipation. This is before before the spies go out. Okay. All of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring back a report to us regarding the route by which we should go up and the cities we will come to. The plan seemed good to me, and I selected 12 of you, 1 from each tribe. They set out and went up into the valley, into the country, and when they reached the valley of Eshcol, they spied it out and gathered some of the land's produce, which they brought down to us. They brought back a report to us and said, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. But you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, it is because the Lord hates us that he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to destroy us. Where are we headed? Our kindred have made our hearts melt by reporting the people are stronger and taller than we. The cities are large and fortified up to heaven. We actually saw there the offspring of the Anakim. These are giant people. I said to you, have no dread or fear of them. The Lord your God who goes before us is the one who will fight for you, just as he did for you in the Egypt before your very eyes, and in the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as one carries a child, all the way that you have traveled until you reach this place. But in spite of this, you have no trust in the Lord your God who goes before you on the way to seek out a place for you to camp in fire by night and cloud by day to show you the route you should take. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, they sent the spies out. The spies gave, generally speaking, a favorable and unfavorable report. Good land, bad people. And we don't think we can take these fortified cities. From a military standpoint, what the people are saying makes perfect sense, okay? They're coming up against fortified cities. They do not have siege works, okay? The people who are there have giants among them, and there are a lot of references to giants, okay? So they're big people.
Do you think they were giant, or just 6'9" or 6'10" or
I
7 foot?
can't say for sure, but you know the description of Goliath was anywhere from 10 to 12 feet tall.
Okay.
So they're big people. The legend was that some heavenly creatures came down and mated with human women. And their offspring were big. Okay? You know, even bigger than NBA players. So, you know, you start seeing people like that and you wonder, I wonder if I could take this guy. Okay. And God is telling them, yeah, you can. And they're saying, well, you know, we're not so sure about that. And so they backed off. Now, what's going on here? Okay, the presentation that we had the other night was excellent. And the commentaries, this is interesting, the commentaries that I've been following use the traditional Mount Sinai as the location, which means that, let's see if I can get this here, okay? The traditional Mount Sinai, which was identified by Constantine's mother, Helena, okay, is down here at the end of the Sinai Peninsula, okay, on the Egyptian side. All of this is Egypt, okay? All of this is Arab. So there is a boundary in the Gulf of Aqaba between Egypt and the Arab country, okay? What the presenter said to us the other night, I think makes tremendous sense. That the actual Mount Sinai is down in here, and that it's in definitely what we would call Saudi Arabia, and that this is the area of the wilderness trek, not the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, this is the area of the wilderness trek, not the Sinai Peninsula. So they are trekking around in what we call Saudi Arabia, not trekking around in Egypt, because the biblical record says once they crossed the Red Sea, they were out of Egypt. Well, you can't get out of Egypt if you're staying over here. If this is the Red Sea that you cross, okay, then you're still in Egypt.
Are you saying that they don't know exactly where Mount Sinai is?
Yeah, there's always been a controversy, okay? See, this Mount Sinai here is a great tourist attraction and has been for centuries upon centuries, because Helena identified this as the place of Mount Sinai. There is no archaeological evidence to suggest that that is where Mount Sinai
Where's your
is.
finger? You can't,
Okay, I'm here,
okay,
okay?
all right.
So if Mount Sinai is here, from that presentation we had the other night, there's tremendous amount of archaeological evidence that this is where Mount Sinai is, over on the Arab side.
Is that a tourist attraction too?
It's going to be. It's going to be, okay? A couple of years ago, that area was designated as a military site by the Saudi government. And they did that so that there would be no archaeological explorations in that area. The Saudis were very determined that nobody give any verification to a Jewish presence there. Okay, now they have the same stories about Moses and Aaron and Joshua and all of that, but as far as they're concerned, they were Islamic characters, not Jewish. Okay, but there's an awful lot of Jewish evidence down there at the new site. Now, the new crown prince of Saudi Arabia has opened that up to exploration, even to Jewish exploration, which is amazing, okay? But his ultimate plan is this whole area down here, is going to be turned into a city 5 times larger than New York. And that Mount Sinai is going to be at the center of it. And the idea is it's going to be a a huge tourist and financial center. And it's going to be, it's like turning the biblical stories into a Disney World kind of thing, okay? What the crown, I've been to Saudi Arabia. They have some spectacular architecture in Saudi Arabia, okay? They do. But nothing that even halfway compares to Dubai. Dubai is just, you think you're going to Oz when you drive into Dubai, okay? There is a sea of cranes on the skyline where they are continuing to build in Dubai. And Dubai is a huge tourist attraction. They don't have 5-star hotels, they have 6-star hotels, okay? They are, it's just an amazing place. It's the world's tallest building and all of that
Where's
stuff.
Dubai?
Dubai is in the United Arab Emirates, okay? And it's up on the,
Can you show that on the map, where it might be?
it's, yeah, okay. Here,
Okay.
okay? Dubai is over here.
And that's a huge tourist.
It is incredible. It is incredible. If you go to the Atlantis complex in Dubai, okay, it's $5,000 a night. And that was several years ago. Okay? So, and I walked through it.
You get sad.
I ate in a restaurant.
Well, somebody used my credit card to do the same thing.
I'll bet.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, then you have some taste of it. Okay? But no, Dubai is for the rich, and you don't even have to be famous, just as long as you're rich. But the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is saying, why can't we do that? So there are a couple of things he's doing. He's trying to develop this big area down here for a huge city and tourist complex, but he's also relaxing Sharia law. The United Arab Emirates are amazing. If you go to the UAE during Christmas, they put Rockefeller Center to shame. The Christmas displays are phenomenal. I mean, when they put up a Christmas tree with gold ornaments, they are gold ornaments, okay? Now, since they're in the Abraham Accords, when Hanukkah comes around, it's all Hanukkah in the United Arab Emirates, okay? It's a huge tourist attraction, huge tourist attraction. They are embracing the potential with Israel like no other country. And they're just doing a spectacular job of it. You can do things in United Arab Emirates that you could never do in Saudi Arabia, okay? I have seen women in all kinds of garb in UAE, from, you know, the whole covering to mini skirts. And, but make no mistake, it's Islamic. And if you say anything to insult the Prophet, the embassy might find out you went to prison a month later. You know,
So you
it's
think
that kind
the
of
Crown
thing.
Prince
Huh?
has embraced this idea from really a financial gain aspect
Yeah.
and not biblically, certainly, because he's, I mean, you
Well,
say it's
that's right.
still Islamic through and through.
Oh, big time. You have to understand that there are all kinds of things to see and to do in that part of the world, but there are things that you can do here that will get you in big trouble there. Okay? Women are not equal in that country. Okay, they are not.
Although he has lightened the rules, he was saying.
Yes, he lightened the rules. Women can now drive.
Yeah.
Women can drive. When I was in Saudi Arabia, women were not allowed to drive, but American military women were driving. We were driving trucks and all kinds of things, and the Saudi women saw that and said, well, if American women can do that, why can't we do that? And so it was on the cusp of the Saudi women, you know, almost having an uprising. The king of Saudi Arabia declared that all American female soldiers were men.
That worked.
Well, it's a big trans thing, I don't know, but that's what allowed them to drive. Yeah, there was a woman who decided to take it upon herself to go ahead and drive because she saw women driving, okay? So she drove, and they arrested her, but then there was such an outcry about it, because we became aware of it, that they let her go. And then after Desert Storm and the Americans left, her family was required to take her out to an arena and stone her to death. So, I mean, that's the kind of country you're talking about.
So they did that, they started.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a whole thing about how can you tour a place like that and condone, how can you support something like that when they treat women that way and everything else,
There's money in it.
Right, I know it's the bottom line.
Yeah, there's money in it. And we're talking a lot of money. And also, one of the things that the Crown Prince is very aware of is that he's on the cusp of having to compete with the United States, which has several Saudi Arabia oil repositories available to it in mass quantity. We have more oil in Texas, we have more oil in Alaska, in Oklahoma. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia, and if we ever pulled it out of the ground, it's better oil than what they have over there, and we bring it out cleaner, and we can bring it out cheaper. And the Saudis know that if they, as they do currently, base an entire economy on oil production, they're going to be hurting in about 20 years. Because the price of oil is going to go through the floor when we start producing.
If we have, I know it's a moot point, I guess, but if we have all this oil, why do we care what Saudi Arabia does?
Right now, because of current policy, we have to pay attention to what Saudi Arabia does because we're not pumping the oil. And we have to beg them to produce. And we're begging Venezuela to produce, but we're not producing it here. Policy. Policy.
Environmental.
Short for politics.
Yes. Okay, so that's why. When the policy changes, the entire world economy is going to change.
Let me ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
No, I want to. All in my understanding, in Saudi Arabia, all the Arab countries are all sand, are they?
They have to import sand to build.
They have what?
They have to import sand to build because their sand is not suitable for concrete.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding.
Crazy.
Where do they import
So
it
all
from?
the buildings that they're doing,
Huh?
all the buildings that they're doing using sand
Yeah.
is important.
Yes.
Where does it come from?
It comes from other countries. Doesn't come from, yeah, but I don't know. Whoever's got sand to sell to the Saudis, you know?
But Dennis, he also said that they weren't able to bring out a lot of artifacts, didn't he?
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
Two things, you cannot dig on that site
Right.
and you cannot bring an artifact out, which is, I think that's
So
important.
all they really have are a lot of pictures.
He has
to
pictures.
prove.
They
Right.
said every time they go back, some of it's been destroyed.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
if the Saudis see that there's a Jewish artifact or record of some sort, like Hebrew writing, they'll rub it out.
It's just phenomenal to me that it is the year 2024 and this hasn't been uncovered before now.
I know.
I can't believe, that's hard to believe,
Not to me, not after I've been there.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
hasn't been recovered.
And
These
there's-
artifacts.
Yeah, and there was no archaeological evidence for the traditional Mount Sinai.
Right.
Correct.
That was unreal
It's,
to
it's
me.
all, it was just like everything you've ever heard. It was like nothing you'd ever heard before,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, take a look at it. Like I said, most biblical commentaries have the wilderness over in the Sinai
It's on my
Peninsula.
map.
And it's, yeah,
I
and
looked.
that's not where it was. It was over here on the other side.
And, you know, I asked him, I said, how do the Jewish people feel about this? You know, and he said, well, some of them care, some of them don't care. You know, I would think it would be, I mean, I would be passionate about it, I think. But he said, I guess they get the feeling that it really, they don't care. I swear, I don't know.
But you know, just logically, why would the Israelites have stayed in Egypt? They would
Right.
have crossed on over to Saudi Arabia.
That's
Well,
correct.
Right.
That then.
That's
you know,
correct.
Midian.
Yeah.
He had all kinds of biblical proof. I mean, it was amazing.
It was a wonderful.
It really
trip.
was, and it's where the Red Sea is versus where we think it is and where they really think it is. I don't know.
I'm convinced.
I was too. I was like, okay.
One of the things you have to bear in mind when it comes to following biblical history is that there is a tension that exists between tradition and word.
And the Jewish people are all about,
Well, this tradition, the Sinai Peninsula, okay? This tradition makes a lot of people a lot of money,
right,
okay? And has, because you've had all these pilgrims coming to Israel to see the sights and all of that. And there's money in tradition. So the site of Bethlehem and the birth of Christ,
Right.
that cave that they used for a church, the site of Calvary, my dad went over there and he was going through the biblical record, and as far as he was concerned, the traditional site for Calvary is not correct. That it's really a bus stop down the road from where the traditional site of Calvary is. So there's a lot of controversy. And by the way, it's not just Saudis that block archaeological studies, okay?
Okay.
Palestinians are tremendous at blocking
okay.
archaeological studies, and so is the Israeli government. Because when you start to dig in former Philistine sites, there are restrictions
I
there,
get it, yeah.
okay? So archaeology over there is a hotbed, and there's a tremendous amount of controversy and competitiveness among the different nations
And
over
it's
the
like,
historical
they
record.
gave an example, like he asked Lee Holder, he said, what about, how can we compare this in the United States? He said, well, you wouldn't want people to think that North Carolina was where the Boston Tea Party was. You know, it's that kind of thing, really. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that significant.
Yeah,
You know, I never knew that when Jesus made the statement, when you've done this to the least of these,
yeah.
that he was talking about the Jews.
Well, that's, okay. That was a speculation. What he said was, when you've done to the least of these, my brethren, he could have been referring to Jews, he could have been referring to his disciples, he could have been to just people who believed in him, okay? When you've done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. And so, basically, and the Jews were not allied with him, by and large. He was a very controversial figure during his lifetime. So not everybody that you call a Jew was necessarily his brother from the standpoint of people who followed him. Okay? So I mean, you've got to be careful about broad speculations like that.
Okay.
Okay? It's not a ringing endorsement of the Jews. Jesus didn't have very many of those. Okay, he actually had more ringing endorsements of Gentiles. So, just be aware. I mean, there are some rare exceptions like Zacchaeus, you know, but when he talked about people with great faith, he was talking about generally Gentiles who would come to him for healing. So, just be aware.
Getting back to Dubai,
Yeah,
what built that city? Was it oil money?
yeah, man.
That's a small country. That
It
must be
is,
sitting on
it
some
is really
reserves.
small. It is really small. but it's sitting on a lot. It's sitting on a lot. And there is, okay, when you say United Arab Emirates, there are, I think, what, 5 emirates, I believe, within that country. And each one has an emir, okay? And the country has a king and a crown prince, okay? There was a king within, I think, the last 20, 30 years who began the liberalization of that country and who was more interested in its economic development than in acquiring personal wealth. He had tremendous personal wealth. Okay, he didn't probably need any more money, but he really did pour the money into economic development in his country, and he had a lot to pour in. And that's why Dubai is what it is, and it's made it a huge financial center, and it's made it a huge tourist attraction, okay? But the real money in UAE is in Abu Dhabi, which is another emirate. That's where I worked. But that's where the real money is. You know, when they building that huge building out there, they went bankrupt. And the emir from Abu Dhabi bailed out the project, and they had to rename it after him. So, but they got so far up, okay, they couldn't get electricity to the upper floors. The only way you get electricity to the upper floors was by extension cords. So, I mean, building standards over there are not the same as here, okay? I mean, I get all kinds of advertisements to get a villa over in UAE, okay? And prices evidently are very competitive. But if you walk into one of those villas, there's not a square corner in the place. They just, it's built by a bunch of Pakistanis who don't know anything about building. And they,
Yeah, there's buildings.
yeah.
They have a golf tournament,
Yeah.
Race to Dubai,
Yes,
and they'll show the tournament, and they'll show those buildings. I mean, they look,
they are spectacular.
yeah, glass and.
Oh, yeah.
elaborate. I mean, it looks like Oz. I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
it does.
amazing.
It does. I mean,
Amazing. From
they
a
have-
distance.
They have whole peninsula and islands that they have built in the shape of palm trees. And each frond on the palm tree has resorts all over it. I mean, they're condos, okay? And they're beautiful, beautiful, and the islands are sinking. So, you know, it's just one of those, you know.
Superficial?
Yeah, well, most of the people who are Emiratis, most of the men who are Emiratis, who have professional degrees, didn't necessarily earn them. Okay? It's not uncommon for an Emirati man to not go past the 8th grade in education. Okay? You got people who have PhDs that can't write. I mean, it's just, you know, it's like that, yeah, yeah. But they've got the money to support it.
But they don't take care of their workers.
They do not take care of their workers. Boy, I'll tell you what, if you are a laborer and
They import
you
all
are,
that.
yeah, all, anything that requires a professional skill set, anything that requires a special skill set, or anything that requires common labor is imported. I mean, their pilots, they have UAE pilots, okay? But most of the fighter jets that are flown for UAE are flown by expats from other countries. The ground crews are mostly expats. My brother-in-law was training their special forces, and they were all Colombians. So, you know, they have the money to bypass some of the normal standards that you would have for your own population to develop skill sets and things like that. So whatever they need, they buy, because they can. Anyway,
That's not sustainable.
The primary reason why Saudi Arabia allowed American soldiers to come in prior to Desert Storm was that when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, all of the expat technicians in Saudi Arabia were getting plane tickets out. And it didn't stop until the 82nd Airborne touched down in Saudi Arabia. But they were losing all their mechanics, they were losing all their air crews, they were losing their pilots, they were losing it all. And there wasn't any way that they could defend unless the Americans came in. And that's why the king, who does not want American feet on the ground in Saudi Arabia, said, yes, let's do it. He didn't have a choice. So, okay. Well, we're getting on there. Let's go ahead and close. We'll finish out chapter 1 and chapter 2. You're going to find some very interesting things. I encourage you to get into these chapters, because what you're going to see is that what is proposed by God for the invasion of these countries is not out of character for what had been typically going on in these countries by other cultures. Okay, so when we look at it and we say, oh, the Jews are so genocidal, okay, take a look at the big picture and see how people fought, generally speaking, in those days, and what they did as a result. So you'll find that in chapters 1 and 2. Okay, so we'll get on with it next week. Got a lot to cover. And thanks for being with us.